Hello, and thanks for checking out episode 13 of the Liberty Mastermind podcast, where three buddies got together once a week and we created a mastermind group to bounce ideas off each other, to help each other, to motivate each other, and to bring value to each other. And it worked out so well that now, once a week, we meet up to bring value to you. And we're doing that today with an interview of Raeford Davis to talk about modern law enforcement. Raeford, welcome to the show. We got Jack and Ox and me, Pat, here, and we've been seeing you get kind of active recently, kind of waving the BS flag for some law enforcement issues. So we'd like you to introduce yourself to the audience and kind of tell us who you are.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for having me on. My name is Raeford Davis. I'm a former police officer with the city of North Charleston in South Carolina. 300-man police force and about a city of 80,000. And, I was just a, compassionate, conservative guy, had a, degree in criminal justice from a Christian university. And I wanted to go out there and help people and make a difference. And so I spent 4 years on patrol, very active community, to say the least, hundreds of arrests. I did 2 years in detective division where we did concentrated mainly on sexual assaults and child abuse. My career was cut short. I was directing traffic, got hit by a pickup truck and broke my leg.
Jeez.
And so it didn't heal back right. And, I kind of lingered for a while and it never did heal back right. So I had to get out, based on that disability. But, I had a lot of kind of a moral crisis with my job even before then. And, I hate to say in some ways I was lucky, but you wonder about just kind of, things happening to you, bad things for good reasons. And wow, that may be the case for me. I certainly had issues with a lot of what was going on in law enforcement, and it kind of disturbed me a lot. So that was in 2007. So it's been 10 years. And what have I done since then? Well, I anguished a lot, and I thought, in my mind and time off, by fundamental questions. When is it okay to use force against another person? Is something constitutional is actually. Does that mean it's correct or moral or righteous?
Man, great quote.
When I follow the use of force continuum, if I pull, even when I'm out of policing, if I pull someone over for a tag light out, could I escalate that and shoot them, and that be okay? and just looking at what we did, I started thinking, man. A lot of what we did was really counterproductive. And what I found, I came to libertarianism. I always kind of had a little streak. I knew who Ron Paul was, before I became a cop. And, things like Lou Rockwell and then, Murray Rothbard, and you start reading that stuff. And then I, went down that rabbit hole with just even things like intellectual property and kind of patent law, or just maybe even nutrition and health, and how we've all been just kind of deceived on fundamental basis. And I realized that virtually everything that I did, so much of what I did as a police officer was counterproductive, and it crushed my ego. Man, I was sick for 2 years, just. And then I just realized, fundamental moral principles of when it is okay to use force against another person cannot be altered by your badge or a law or constitution or the majority opinion or the good of the people or whatever. Anything you do that is morally wrong, if you did it as an individual citizen, is wrong, period. And that's it. And that eliminates about 80% of what law enforcement does in the government. And so, I consider myself, a voluntarist, anarchist, and I speak out. Why do I speak out? Well, in a lot of ways, I'm speaking to other cops because they are not only harming other people, but they're harming themselves like I did emotionally and spiritually. And so I'm trying to protect them from their unintentional harm that they're really causing themselves. And I have a duty. That why am I speaking out right now? Well, as a cop, you have that duty, man. Let me tell you, you get that call. The tones go out on the radio for an armed robbery, or just some kind of the calls, and they're the real deal. And what do? You go, and it kind of shakes me up just to kind of think about it. But just you're like, oh, I've got to go to this call, and it's gonna. Say it's a robbery or some type of assault or something with shots fired, and you're like, I've got to roll up there in my car and step out and hey diddle diddle, right up the middle. That's what I have to do because I'm going to do it so someone else doesn't have to. And if you get whether it's a rational fear or not, but I got to get out of my car, I get shot in the face right there.
Yep.
And I did that. And so now I can at least speak out and to prevent other officers from getting harmed, not from getting shot, but from getting harmed. And so I want to, speak to them and just entire society and community and say, hey, what we're doing is wrong. And now people are maybe, not like what I have to say, but by golly, if I went to calls like that, those armed robbery calls, man, I can at least talk out on the radio a little bit or write a few articles or send a few tweets speaking the truth and use my name. And I'll say that I know I'm going a little long, but that's, you see my avatar is my, one of those, those little stock little, cop photos or, military boot camp kind of photos looking things. And that, that's me. That's what I used. That was the exact uniform I wore, my badge and everything when I went out there to protect people and when I harmed people. Mm-hmm. And when I harmed them, enforcing those unjust laws. And so I can use that same picture to stand up and to represent people that are unjustly harmed and try to protect other officers from harming others.
That's great.
Raeford, there's a quote that a couple people said. I think the first time I heard it was someone said it referring to economics and money, about the money system. And then I heard Vin Armani saying it on one of his other interviews. And we actually said that to him. We interviewed him a few days ago, and I actually said that quote to him. If your paycheck depends on you being wrong, it's really hard to convince yourself that you're not right, which is what it sounds like most officers kind of deal with. They may know that I might not agree with this call I'm not going to, but I kind of have to do it because it's tied to their paycheck and their retirement and their family and their livelihood. I think that's one of the evil traps that kind of sucks you into that is you're climbing up that ladder and you're building your lifestyle, and then you kind of have to go along to get that paycheck at the end.
Yep. In retirement.
Yeah, and it's a little more complicated than just, well, I want to get paid this week.
Yeah, of course.
And I'll say, when you first get in there, it's what most cops, what they join up. Hey, they're not, psychopaths. I'm joining in because, I'm a scumbag and I want to dominate people. That's not it. The cops get in because they want to serve their community. Do they want some excitement? Yeah, they do. Absolutely. But so you get in and you've been through all this indoctrination. They don't call it basic indoctrination for nothing.
Basic indoc, yep.
And you get out there and so you just go by what everybody else is telling you, and by the time you start to realize, hey, what we're doing is not working, and then you get enough kind of seniority and confidence in yourself in a few years to really see, hey, this is definitely wrong. But by then you're in it. You got 5 years, 7 years in, you're, hey man, I'm going to make sergeant here or something like that. You got a wife and kids, and you're just going to turn around and yeah, you're a good way through to a retirement. You're going to give all that up, go tell your wife, hey, honey, this whole career that I sacrificed for, you never slept a good night's sleep when I was out on patrol because you're worried about me. And I begged you to let me do this, even though it was dangerous. Well, now I'm going to give all that up and we're going to starve just for kind of nebulous integrity reasons that I can't really explain to you.
That'll be an easy talk, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do some work with what used to be called, I guess, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and I think through our research, they recently changed their name. Is that correct? Can you kind of tell us what that is?
Yeah. So that's one of the things that really helped me to speak out was LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And these are guys, Peter Chris, Jack Cole, that's a career narcotics detectives and investigators and police officers, that started like in the 1970s. So they spent their whole career, fighting this drug war. And they did this organized to say, we need to legalize all drugs. Why do we need to legalize all drugs? Because it doesn't work. And it's the prohibition that makes us less safe. And, it corrupts the cops and it costs a ton of money and we lose our liberties doing it. And, they didn't stick with just, hey, we need to legalize marijuana, but all drugs. I mean, that's huge. You're like, what? I can't believe a cop is saying that. But I loved what they said. Hey, this is what we believe in. And, as long as you agree with that, come on board. And you're a former, you're in some type of law enforcement capacity. Come on. And, when I signed up with them, I swear either I meant to, or I think at the beginning I signed up with like a fake email because I was kind of scared. But I quickly got over that and joined them and saw these guys, that had been doing this. They've been talking about this stuff for years, man, before I even started to become a cop. Jeez, I should have listened to them.
So you briefly touched on this, Raeford. You said a little bit about it's shocking kind of to hear someone in law enforcement to say that we need to legalize drugs. And there's definitely some current sheriffs, I know not in my jurisdiction that I work, but nearby, that have huge campaigns that say, we better not legalize this stuff. Can you kind of draw this line a little better about why would that be a good thing? I mean, even maybe just from a cop's point of view. So just some regular street cop, why would this be a good thing for him to legalize all these things? Not him to be the one legalizing it, but for that to happen in his area.
Well, for people, alcohol prohibition is, we know that so much of the gang violence from the 1930s was prohibition related. Oh, that was a horrible mistake. It created Al Capone and the Banyan Gang and those guys, machine gunning each other, and St. Valentine's Day Massacre. All of that was part of the alcohol business. And as soon as we legalized it, they had to give all that up and move on to something else. And so the same thing with other drugs. It doesn't matter the substance. Very quickly, you see all police officers, you ask any of them, is our drug enforcement working? And they'll say, no way.
No way.
None. Now, there's a good bit that say we need to get tougher.
Yeah.
But I saw that. I saw just kind of, as a police officer, how many, and ask any police officer, how many drive-by shootings between rival beer companies or local liquor distributors have you ever responded to? Beer distributors. They have Miller and Budweiser, and those are here's their quote unquote distributors, traffickers, loading their product into these convenience stores on the street corner.
Don't they know that product could kill people?
They're deadly, tequila. Oh my gosh. Loading that stuff on shelves next to each other, fiercest competitors, yet they never shoot each other.
Weird.
Why is that? Kids, one of the things, and see, I worked in kind of juvenile investigations and stuff. I saw it. kids were specifically targeted to get out on the street and sell drugs because, well, if they got caught, they wouldn't get in as much trouble. 2, they would work very cheap, and they kind of liked the allure. And so just, these other drug dealers would say, come on, come work for me, man. And kids could stand out on the street for a while, and, and it would be, something they could do. So they were specifically targeted and sucked into the all of the violence and everything that you see based on the prohibition enforcement.
And I don't see kids getting sucked into trafficking alcohol very frequently on the street.
No, they're not, are they? And they're not. And also, I just had a liberty issue. We're going around dragging people out of their cars and their homes, putting our hands on their pants and their pockets and taking their belongings from them, threatening to shoot them if they resist. Just on a fundamental liberty issue. I ask any cop, so alcohol prohibition required a constitutional amendment, right? And they're like, yeah. Well, what about where's the constitutional amendment to alcohol to outlaw other drugs? Oh, they didn't need one. Well, why? Really? Why is that? So just from a constitutional issue, the federal drug enforcement laws are blatantly unconstitutional.
You know what? I'll give you a sweet gem of information here. So I told you recently, I was part of the Coast Guard's biggest drug seizure unit for more than 4 years of my life. And that was all we did. It was just drug seizures, and just internationally and overseas. When we trained our new guys, one of my kind of aha moments was I went to get qualified, so I sat in front of 2 other guys that were already qualified. I don't know who qualified the first one, but you just go through the line, you get qualified, and then you qualify other people. So I'm sitting there in this qualification board to be a drug operator, and they go, "What's the Fourth Amendment?" And I had literally a cheat sheet, like a worksheet that said the answer on it. And I'm like, "Oh, this answer." And they went, "Great, Fourth Amendment. What's the Fifth Amendment?" And I went, "Oh, great, it's that." But that was it. That's where it stopped. And I thought, that's weird. They're only worried about those 2. And then when I started training people, I kind of got a little curious, and I'm like, "How about what's the First Amendment?" And they're like, "Well, that's not on my cheat sheet." I'm like, "Yeah, didn't you do this whole oath thingy when you got hired that you should kind of defend the whole Constitution?" And they went, "Well, yeah, good point." And so I did what I could while I was stuck in that position. I tried to enlighten people, and occasionally someone would say, "Oh, hey, that's a good point. Let me research that." And then I would get real deep in the weeds, and I'd say, "Hey, we also have to memorize what we call U.S. code." So it's a federal code or a law, and it's what gives the Coast Guard its power to do law enforcement. So I think we had to memorize it over and over and over. So let me tell you what I can remember off the top of my head. 14 USC 89 Alpha. And it says the Coast Guard may make searches, seizures, inquiries, inspections, and arrests on the high seas. So on the high seas, like international water, and all waters over which the United States has jurisdiction, for the prevention, detection, and suppression of violations of laws of the United States. And then it goes on to say more. And I thought, well, that talks about searching stuff and making inspections. Wait, but these guys that are qualifying me to do this job, they just said, what is the Fourth Amendment? And it talks about searches and seizures, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. But there's this code that says, any Coast Guard member can go on board any boat at any time in any place to look for violations of laws. And I thought, these fucking 2 things don't add up together. And then I kind of started doing a lot of research, and I started asking people, "Hey, can you explain to me how the Fourth Amendment says this, and it's the law of the land, and then underneath that legal structure, we kind of do a Post-it note that says, oh, no, except this and that and this and that." I said, if it's that important, shouldn't they have changed the Constitution instead of just writing another law afterwards? So a ton of people don't know this, but we have almost complete 100% jurisdiction on any vessel within the United States and without the United States to do basically whatever the fuck we want to. And we don't always exercise that, but we sure as hell do a lot. And I think that is wildly unconstitutional.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I grew up conservative, like I said, and so you have that whole kind of get tough, support law enforcement and the military, streak, and at the same time that whole liberty streak with them, and when those two kind of conflict. To see that cognitive dissonance short circuit, and they'll say, well, it's the brilliance of the Supreme Court in their renderings of the decisions. The Supreme Court says that's not, it's not necessary to alter the Constitution, and so
great, thanks.
Yeah, and you're like, well, though the same ones that said, that ruled that slavery was cool, those guys, all right, whatever, and then you say, well, the Supreme Court's part of the same government that's oppressing you. So, it's like a mafia boss asking another mafia boss, hey, is what we're doing legal? Yeah, we checked our code, and yeah, it's good.
We're good.
Yeah, Pat, they make you memorize it.
Yeah, but they don't tell you what it means.
Right. Isn't that kind of like a ritual or something?
Sure, yeah. Well,
kind of like a little brainwashing. Oh, it's written right here on a piece of paper on this napkin. I mean, so
Raeford, I told you a little bit. My biggest deal with this my website, uncensoredtactical.com, and with Liberty Mastermind podcast, my biggest bone to pick is that I give full disclosure about what happens behind the scenes as much as I can without, breaking any laws or kind of codes or anything like that. Here's something else that happens behind the scenes. Okay, so we're talking about getting qualified with cheat sheets and memorizing things. Another question I would ask people when I started to certify newer officers that were going to be drug agents. So they would sit in front of me and they'd have their study sheet all memorized. And I'd say, all right, big day, here we go. What's the Fourth Amendment? And they'd tell me. What's the Fifth Amendment? And they'd tell me. And I'd say, what's the Second Amendment? And if, my reputation started to spread throughout the unit, so people would kind of learn a little bit. And they'd say, oh, yeah, the Second Amendment's this, and the first one's that. I'm like, all right, great job. And then I go, all right, we'll read what gives us our authority to search anybody's fucking boat wherever and whenever we want. And they go, oh, that's 14 USC 89 Alpha. Great, can you repeat it? Sure, it's this. And I go, okay, great, where'd you learn that? And they go, I studied. Great, where'd you read that from? Well, I got a guide, a study guide. Great. Where'd that come from? Well, it's a law. Okay, who wrote that law? What do you mean, like the guy's name? No, like the office, the title, the agency. Who wrote that? It's 14 USC. I think it means US code. I don't know. Okay, so you don't know who gave us that authority? Well, I guess Congress, right? Well, yeah, kind of. Do you know which one? And do you know when they wrote it? Do you know why they wrote it? Any of that? So throughout our board, our qualification board, people would say all these answers like, what do we do if we find a short-barreled rifle? Well, we look up form ATF 52-2. Great. What is that? Where do you get that form? And are you sure that's correct? Yeah. How do you know it's correct? Well, it was on the study guide. So 99% of these people that are doing the job, even in law enforcement and the police academy, you don't look up a lot of the codes and the laws. You have your workbook, you have your textbook, you copy it, you memorize it, and you're in. You're good. So almost 90% of the information that I've used in my professional careers comes off of worksheets and study guides. It does not come from the source. So I think that is a huge eye-opener for anyone that cares to listen.
Oh yeah, well, we would do the same. We would do the same thing. We would have just Word documents for our different. Whenever we'd make an arrest or a search warrant or something, they'd just be Word documents. We would just cut and paste the names and the different addresses in, and oh my gosh, that stuff wasn't even right. And I'll tell you, one of the first things, kind of with the drug war, that is interesting. When I first became a cop. And I'm getting trained with my FTO and made one of my first, drug arrest. I'm sure it was like a crack pipe. So it wasn't even drugs. It was,
paraphernalia, right?
A paraphernalia, and writing up the arrest report in the computer. And so we'd have our records management system. And if you entered the forms incorrectly, it would not validate. Well, I went to, I put in my information and the person we arrested. And of course, if you see something, which is the crack pipe, you had to put a property sheet in, and it wouldn't validate. And I'm like, why is this not working? And they're like, well, you need to put in a victim. And the computer's telling me this. Yeah, the computer says, oh, you need a victim. I'm like, so I'm asking my FTO, well, who's the victim? And they go, well, just put society and list the address of City Hall for North Charleston as the physical address. And so that's who the victim was in our drug arrest. So even the computer knew that what we were doing did not have a victim and should be an invalid arrest, but yet we would trick it into validating this stupid little drug arrest.
That's crazy. Hey, are you familiar with the Livonia DUI stuff that's going on with their super scientific weed sobriety tests that are supposedly more scientific than a blood test or a hair test?
You talking about like they call it breathalyzer or something?
No. It's kind of like an alcohol DUI test, not a breathalyzer, but they ask you a series of questions and make you do a series of movements or whatever, and they can decide that you are or you aren't under the influence of marijuana, and they can arrest you. And if they test you later and it comes back negative, they're just kind of like, well, it was out of your system by the time you got tested. And several people have protested this and filed lawsuits or whatever, and they just come back and say, well, this is more scientific than a blood test or a hair sample. So we were right. You're on drugs.
Particularly with marijuana and THC, there's no science out there that says that this particular blood level is indicative of some type of impairment. There's no science. No scientist will say yes, this level is impairment, so it's just dependent on a lot of things. Your tolerance, just a lot of different issues. So there's not a good blood test. A lot of the impairment is just kind of a whole fear mongering type of thing with the marijuana impairment. Because now in South Carolina, our statute is if you are materially and appreciably impaired by any substance, you're guilty of driving under the influence. And so we've had people arrested for being under the influence of cold medication or, even properly prescribed, antidepressants or any other type of medications like that.
That's everybody. Oh my God. Everybody.
Which is everybody. And,
right.
And in some ways, I would say that, dang, cold medication, you probably shouldn't drive when you're feeling bad and you've taken a lot of cold medication. You probably are impaired. Is a diabetic when if they take too much insulin, should they get a DUI? If people that are off people that are off their medication and should be on medication, is that an impaired person?
Oh gosh,
they should be criminally charged. So,
Raeford,
yeah.
How do they test for those drugs? I mean, is it like hey, are you taking anything, or do they do a blood test? I mean, how are people getting in trouble for cold medicine or prescribed meds?
Probably because they have them in their vehicle or they admit to taking them.
Okay.
And so they get arrested and then maybe they go on further and do some type of blood draw or something to determine so if you have any level whatsoever under South Carolina law, that's you're shown as a DUI.
That's wild. Yeah, for a bunch of reasons. I mean, so many people are on prescription medications, whether it's something in family medicine or my field, mental health.
The other thing that just occurred to me is some medications stay in the body, stay in the system for days and days and days. Like Prozac.
THC is one. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It's
THC
fat
is
soluble.
over a month. It's fat soluble. It stays in the body over a month. At least that's the way I learned it. But I was thinking of something like Prozac. Prozac's got a ridiculous half-life, and it would stay in the body maybe over a week. So, if someone stopped taking it today and they get pulled over 5 days from now, and they can get in trouble because it's still in the system. That just, I don't know, it's wild.
I would agree. I mean, at some point, if someone is causing an imminent danger to other people on the road, you have to stop them before they harm someone. And so does law enforcement have a right to do that? Yes, at some level. What they do now, they've just turned it into this whole kind of a money-making scheme where there's some cities, I think it's out in Arizona, and there's other states as well. They'll seize your car.
Yeah.
They'll pull you up for DUI and seize your car, and impound it and sell it. And it's part, it's for like a civil asset forfeiture type of deal. That was an instrumentality of a crime, is what they call it. And so it becomes this giant profit-making scheme. And so, that's not proper
a good point.
Policing. That's policing for profit. That's not protecting anyone.
Right. On the LEAP website, I was looking at the sentencing reform stuff, and it talks about giving judges, more power to hand out sentences based more on the individual. But what do we do when judges are in on this too? And it's like you said, it's just a money-making scheme. Like, what can we do?
I would say this. Police officers, these are men like you and me that are out there trying to serve our community. You need to understand that you are part of a system that has some very incompetent and corrupt aspects to it. And you are that initial reaction. A judge can do nothing someone unless you put the handcuffs on them first.
Right.
So you need to recognize even if you believe, and that's another thing about the drug enforcement just in general. Even if you believe that you should be able to stop and seize people, stop them from doing drugs under certain circumstances. Understand that even those laws that you think might be basically just have just become so perverted that they've lost any semblance of justice and are not serving the community. And so you need to just, even if you think you may be in the right, you've got to stop feeding that system until it can straighten itself out.
Let me jump in for one quick second. So you might remember from grade school, from our government classes, you guys know the phrase checks and balances, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when
they don't exist anymore.
Well, when I was in high school, I had learned that it's the judicial system and the executive branch and the enforcement branch being checks on each other. On Jack Spirko's show, I think it was years ago, he got into a tangent and he said that there are other checks on the system. Jury nullification is one of those checks and balances. So if you get 6 jurors in a box and they say, this is ridiculous, we're not sending someone to a cage for breaking this stupid law. It was an issue with alcohol prohibition. It was one of the things I think that helped end it. If I'm wrong, let me know. You might know more than I do. So that's one of the checks and balances. Go ahead.
But most people don't know about jury nullification.
Correct. Most people also don't know that law enforcement, one of the tools we have is called discretion, and that is a huge check and balance on the system as well. So if I show up on scene and there's this new crazy law that says every fucking Friday you got to do a handstand when a cop drives by, if it passes and I drive by and I see that you're not doing your handstand, and I can go, you know what, this is a fucking joke. I'm not making this arrest, and I drive away. Now I can take different levels of action and some of the softer options, which I guess still down the road or technically at the end of a gun, but I can issue a court citation where you have to show up later in court, or I can give you a verbal or written warning, or I can take no action, which I think is the best. So what police officers have, which it's invisible to this anti-cop crowd. I used to be blindly patriotic, and I know that a lot of the internet community is blindly anti-law enforcement. But one of the tools that they don't see that we use, because you can't see it unless you're in the cop car with us, one of the tools that we use all the time, what I like to call the less evil cops, or the good ones, is the discretion to do nothing. So if I see someone roll through a stop sign and I could go, you know what, this is ridiculous. There's no one on the street. It's 2 a.m. Have a nice night. I don't even initiate a stop. I just bye, let you go. So discretion is a huge check and balance on that system as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And you see people say, well, cops have no choice but to enforce the laws. And you know that in real life, even law enforcement people will get up there and say that we have no discretion.
We have no choice.
Yes, we have no choice. That's just a total joke. Of course they do. I'll tell you one story. Our in North Charleston, when I was there, our county council enacted some loitering laws, some city loitering statutes. And I mean, this is basic unconstitutional law. I mean, it was the text. I remember reading this in criminal justice, just standing for no apparent purpose is in the city of Chicago or something is illegal. And the Supreme Court struck it down. And that was like the exact wording of our own statute that the city enacted. And so our lawyers, the city lawyers, they were kind of funny. They came out and they're like, okay, we're going to make sure we instruct everybody on this law. And so what they were kind of slick about it. They're like mandatory training. And they went out and they said, all right, when you have this situation, don't use this new law. We have an older one over here that will work. Hey, this situation, don't use this new law. Use this older one over here. And so it was kind of funny. So they were like stomping their foot the whole time saying, do not use this law to enforce it ever because it's totally unconstitutional. So that was one time that was kind of funny. This is dumb.
Okay, short technical difficulty. All right, let's switch to the next segment here. Raeford, do you want to talk a little bit about that recent nurse arrest that's blowing up the internet?
Yeah, so Nurse Wobbles?
I think so, yeah.
That was arrested by Detective Jeff Payne of the Salt Lake City Police Department, part of their blood draw unit. Does that not disturb anyone that law enforcement has a blood draw unit in the? I mean, is that really not just some type of dystopian type? We're going to take your blood.
Yes. I mean, of the Fifth Amendment, you have the right to not incriminate yourself unless you're unconscious, and we take your blood from you. Yeah.
So. I watched that and that's just one of those things. It just got me so upset. I had to get up and walk away. It was really hard to just even read the rest of it after I saw that. There's just a visceral, just sickness. And you know what? A lot of it, I see myself in that detective. I gotta be honest. I mean, we arrested people like that all the time. You not only just straight up make mistakes, but just how you just arrest people just so, and we did that, whether it's just trespassers or, driving under suspension or, just anything like that. You'd see all of these laws that we would arrest people for because they didn't comply. They didn't go with the program, called them POP. Piss off the police. And just the level that you can go to justify, that type of arrest based on non-cooperation. That's how law enforcement works in a lot of ways. I've seen where people have said, well, this is a conspiracy. And it, you know what, it may be. It may be the victim that the police department was trying to draw blood from. He was like this totally innocent victim from a crash that the Utah Highway Patrol was chasing a guy And so it was during a vehicle pursuit that this guy veered off across the road and struck this Mr. Gray, who happened to be a volunteer deputy as well. He was driving an 18-wheeler in his full-time job. But that's who they were trying to draw blood from. He's totally innocent guy. The theory is that somehow they're trying to, cast blame somewhere else because, this was part of a police chase that violated policy. And while that may be the case, I would say that it doesn't have to be a great conspiracy for law enforcement to abuse people on this level. This is what happens. This is just a run of the mill. Now, is this all the time? Of course not. But does it happen a whole lot more regularly than you think? Absolutely.
Yep.
Look at just think of Sandra Bland. That's the young girl. Was she in Texas? Young lady. She got arrested maybe for like driving under suspension or something, and then she died in jail under suspicious circumstances. They say she hung herself.
Mm-hmm.
Just very kind of BS little charges or whatever. Heck, even Freddie Gray in Baltimore. That the Baltimore police chased him down and his neck got broken somehow on his way to jail and he died from it. Freddie Gray had committed no crime when police officers chased him down. When they started chasing him, he had done nothing. He was out on the street. That's it. And so he was, in a way, he was just as innocent as that nurse. So, Jack, you're up in Pickens County. Just next to you, what was that, 2 years ago when Zachary Hammond was shot in the head in the Hardee's parking lot by
an undercover cop?
Yeah. By somebody sworn to serve and protect. And that was, what crime had he committed at the time? Nothing to get shot over. The dude panicked. Somebody shoved a gun in his face, and they ended up shooting him. So again, those are just. We did this all the time. It happens, and it's some mistakes by police officers. Are you going to have that? Yeah, but this is law enforcement, and this whole urge to just say, obey the law. Law enforcement, you must comply with them.
We can't.
And society will fail if you don't support law enforcement and respect them and obey every little thing they say. And that breeds irresponsibility on law enforcement and makes them a danger to the community.
Yeah. And when there's 40,000 new laws across this country that are created every year, we can't follow every law.
Right. And we sure as hell can't follow our policy policy either. So much
evil.
of it.
A little Freudian slip there.
Right.
So, I
wanted to jump in on that note because it sounds like some of what happened over your career arc weighs on you, or at least it weighed on you. And I want to jump in on a note. I've heard you say in other podcasts that PTSD real big in the news and in the literature and the research. And I've heard you say, I think that PTSD is not so much what's happened to a person, but maybe the cumulative effect of what a person has done. And I've heard you tie that into law enforcement. Do you have any anything to add to that idea, or?
Well, I do. PTSD, and you can probably, give the better, kind of medical descriptions than I can. But you have, people, you are exposed to trauma. And so you have unresolved stress and anxiety. You have other things like, survivor's guilt, or somebody that was abused, carries that trauma with them. But also there's an addition to that, and they they call it, in the military, moral injury. And it's maybe, they say, well, it's things you may have done that disturb your sense of morality. You think they say it like things you had to do to survive. That was against your general sense of morality. And see, they don't even go far enough. Part of what you see PTSD is moral injury. And that is when you cause harm to another person. It doesn't matter if you're well-intentioned. It does not matter if what you did was legal. If you harm another person, if you act in a fundamentally morally wrong manner to another person, you harm yourself. You suffer a damage to your own spirituality and to your own moral fiber. You can call it cosmic karma or natural law or just God's will, just fundamental rights and wrongs of human interaction. And whenever you violate that, you harm yourself. And so when you're talking about police officers, having PTSD and stress, do they see trauma? Yes. Are they stressed just because of just kind of some of the fears that they have to deal with, year in and year out in their job? Some of it's legitimate. A lot of it's self-imposed. Yes. And that's real harm. But that additional moral injury that they cause to themselves, and that is never addressed. Why is it not addressed? Well, the first thing you have to do to address that moral injury is to admit what you did was wrong. And you could say, well, everything I did was legal, and I was a nice guy. I'm trying to help, and you're saying it was still wrong. And that's why I'm suffering? And the answer is yes. But see, the structure and the system, law enforcement can't admit that. You mean stuff we do is legal is still wrong? And not only are we harming our citizens, but our police officers also suffer from it, suffer from the consequences of that. They cannot admit that. So right off the bat, it cannot be treated because in our current system, because they have to admit that what they do is fundamentally morally wrong.
And you get the same tie back again, full circle, that if you want to admit that what you're doing is morally wrong, you still got to put food on the table at the end of the night. So a lot of cops are still stuck, and they say, well, I don't like it, but I'll just let it tear my soul apart, and I'll just keep grinding and keep going to work.
Right.
They do. So you talk to cops and former cops, you see how many cops self-destruct.
Yeah.
It's a ton. Man. It's a ton. And if you ask them a lot of times, why'd you leave, or why'd you get out, or whatever, you'll have a lot of them. They'll just say, well, it just kind of wasn't what I thought it was. Or those type of things, and they're very, very vague. And I think that a lot of it is that moral injury is affecting them, even if they don't realize it. And they can't articulate it because we're never taught that. So they just say, well, yeah, just kind of wasn't, what I thought it was, or I wanted to change. And I think that's a lot of it, what it is.
So. I've said on a couple interviews that I've been on, I don't really fit in very well with the police squad that I'm a part of right now, and I haven't since I got there. I also have the lowest arrest rate for my entire squad, and I have since day one. So when I operate out there, because I'm a little more, I'm not totally at the end of the road yet. I mean, it's a journey, but I'm a little more enlightened than everyone else that I work with. So I operate based on principle. And before I make any arrest, I ask myself several questions, and a lot of times the answer to that question is no, so I don't make an arrest. Luckily, my department doesn't breathe down my neck about it, but there's still consequences to not having a very large statistic sheet for my arrests. So some of the questions I ask are, am I acting as a tax collector for the state, or am I protecting somebody? And that's usually the first one where I go, nah, not making this arrest. Another question I ask is an arrest the most effective option? So can I solve this without anyone going to jail tonight? And I like to take that option, and usually that solves the other cases too. So since we're talking about principles, I know you referenced the Pelian principles, and they actually teach that in the police academy in Florida where I'm at. But I don't think that it's lip service. They don't mean it, but they tell you it just so you've heard it. So you want to talk about a couple of those? Do you have any kind of hidden away that you want to bring out?
Yeah. In principle number 6, police use physical force to the extent necessary to secure the observance of the law or to restore order only when the exercise of persuasion, advice, and warning is found to be wait a minute, I lost it. Is found to be insufficient.
Yeah.
And to only use the minimum degree of physical force which is necessary on any particular occasion for achieving a police objective. Minimum force necessary, and that mindset is, is to escalate, and so that one right there. Police are the public, and the public are the police. With number 2. Recognize that the power of the police to fill their function duties is dependent on public approval and their action and behavior and their ability to secure and maintain public respect. So if you lose respect, you can't do your job.
Absolutely.
And the police have absolutely lost respect.
So
they have lost respect.
I see. Go ahead.
I mean, maybe this isn't the case, but it seems to me that law enforcement is trained to escalate the situation.
Let me jump in there, because there's a difference between, people say this all the time, law enforcement are trained to, shoot, fight, whatever, talk, speak, lie. There's a difference between training and figuring shit out over and over and over and becoming aware of it and what gets in check and trying and failing and figuring your own path out. There's a difference between that and being trained. So, Jack, while you said they're trained to escalate, technically, I've never seen an escalation training where they said, you better use way more force. I've never seen that. But when I'm on the street and I get it beat into me where I go, okay, I show up and this guy goes, I want to fight you. I go, please don't fight. I can't work through that whole spectrum. I don't have the time or the safety or the ability to go, oh, hey, sir, can we please talk first? Oh, let me put my open palm on your arm and please guide you towards the police car. I can't do that, because as soon as I touch him and I try and
he goes crazy.
I get knocked out. I get punched in the face. I'm done. So so what we think is, well, the minimum use of force would be I knock him out. That's better than shooting him. So I might take that first action that I feel, because my spectrum and society's spectrum are different. So they say, oh, why didn't he wrestle him to the ground? Well, if I wasted my time wrestling him, I was going to lose. So what we think is the minimum force is not what other people think is the minimum force. So
and most of the time they don't see most of that situation anyway. So
yeah, and if people aren't familiar with those violent physical confrontations, or they don't know the whole story, or if you're with a repeat offender who always runs or always fights or always has a weapon, I mean, there's a lot of that story that's missing. I'm not apologizing for excessive force. I think it's terrible. But I do know that if I'm dealing with a bigger guy or a violent guy, or if I'm really fucking tired and I can't focus anymore, I sometimes know that I have to take the most swift action that I can within my spectrum of violent options. So I can shoot you, I can hit you with a club, I can tase you, I can punch you and knock you out. But for me, if I just body slam you real quick, you're going to jail. And that's my lowest option. So a lot of people get wrapped around the axle of, he should have used less. Well, maybe, but I also might have fucking gotten killed if I did that. So there's a spectrum there.
That was a good answer.
I definitely agree with that. I would also say that officers can kind of manipulate that use of force continuum, and they can create that non-compliance. And so they, just very basically of giving conflicting instructions to someone. Step out of the car. Step out of the car. Don't move. Yeah. Get on the ground. Don't move. Those type of things. And just kind of you want that arrest, or you want to put your hands on that person because you want to search them, and you're looking for dope and a gun, not necessarily, because you're trying to get an arrest, and so you manipulate the situation. So you in some ways you kind of create that danger, or you just use it. You do what you're going to do, and then you write the report later. Based on the use of force continuum, but you can escalate it, you can manipulate that, and sometimes it's not even intentional or really conscious of what officers are doing, but it's the fundamental thing is officers are never back down, never, when they should. Again, I mean,
I've been taught over and over that we have no duty to retreat.
And what they're telling you is don't. I remember when I was in the academy and we did, even the training. I remember the FATS training, the firearms simulation training. You watch the little movie screen and fire the little fake gun. And,
those are fun.
And they shoot ping pong balls back at you or something like that. The instructor does, if you don't do it right. But even that, I remember no one ever said, "Hey, you know what? Sometimes, if a traffic stop, if you just, you kind of know that this is not going to go well, just let it go. Whether you think this is going to escalate to where you're going to end up really hurting someone, or you might get hurt." Just let it go and resolve it, or just let them go. No one ever said that. I had to ask, is that ever okay? Is it all right if you to do that? And I kind of, yeah, kind of, I guess. But that, that was just kind of on the side. But even that whole firearms training puts you into that mindset where you're into this, shoot or don't shoot, type of thing, and really in some ways inculcate you into that fear mode. Some of it's certainly legitimate, but it just kind of trains you to that response, and that's part of, I would say, the cop gun culture. When you have your gun in your hand, you really don't have any other options. So if you're quick to grab your gun, you've just kind of you've kind of forced you forced your option. That's pretty much all you've got, because now one hand is full.
Yeah. I'll give you one of my favorite Peelian principles, and you already said it, but I'll tell you a different way that I got to that one. So number 7 here is to maintain at all times. Well, let me give the audience a quick background. The Peelian principles is this guy, Robert Peel, who created what some people call the first modern police force, and it was in, I believe, Great Britain, somewhere in there, right?
Yeah, he was in Great Britain. I think in the 1830s. He was he was like the prime minister or something. Yeah, I want to get into Peel in just for a minute. So first of all, I love the Peelian principles, and if law enforcement would follow them, we would be much better off.
We have a total different face. Yep.
They're totally so. Go ahead.
So that's the background on Peel, and we can talk more about it if you like. But my principle was the police are the public, and the public are the police. That's number 7. And in the academy, they talked. The newest catchphrase is, community policing. We want to be part of the community. Well, and the first step that fell apart for me was on my hiring packet. I got told, list anybody that you know in your life that's a felon that you still communicate with on a regular basis or have any relationship with. And I'm thinking, well, if the people are the police and the police are the people, shouldn't I have some friends that have made some mistakes and maybe learned from them and served their time and got out and are living successful lives, even though they are quote-unquote a felon, prior felon? And I thought, I bet you he can't get hired. And then I thought, it's 2017, so half the people I know in my life have full sleeve tattoos, and a lot of the beards are a big thing now. So I thought, there's several departments that have told me that, once I'm hired, I have to shave my face every day. And I thought, well, I know some people that are real life people that have beards and still have a successful job. And I know lots of people that have full sleeve tattoos that are really nice people that can't get a job. So I thought, okay, you're saying that the people are the police, but you don't mean it. So God forbid someone make a mistake in their life and learn from it and then want to be a police officer? Can't do it. So I thought, that's lip service, like much of the other things that I hear in law enforcement.
Yes, and that also goes with the type of accountability. Law enforcement has this qualified immunity, no duty. Supreme Court says no duty to actually protect anyone specifically, and then are held to a lower standard of conduct when they use force against another person. So,
and held to a higher level of conduct when you do something that might not even be illegal, but what other people view as strange or immoral, even outside of your working hours.
Yeah, so it's just totally upside down from how you treat the public, and that whole kind of Blue Lives Matter type attitude that is harmful because it separates law enforcement from their very community.
Yeah, even the verbiage.
Oh yeah.
I deal with police constantly, being an EMT and on rescue, and just regular conversations. During scenes, we'll talk about stuff, and they'll say, "Well, the civilians do this," and I'm like, "Well, you're a civilian. I'm a civilian. We're not any different. We're just providing a different function."
Right. So, yes, I suggest all police officers, they need to read the principles of policing that is established by, Robert Peel, and align your actions with those. Now, that being said, look at Robert Peel and who he was. He was like the Prime Minister of Britain. This is during the time when one of the times during like the Great Potato Famine, which is actually, the Irish Holocaust. That's where Great Britain militarily occupied Ireland. They did it in phases. They've done it for hundreds of years. But, in the early 1800s, this was one of their bigger phases. Why was everybody in Ireland starving to death? That's because they had this basically kind of slave plantation system where the people that actually worked the land couldn't afford to buy their own products that they made. So the butter, the sheep, all of the livestock and everything, that was just being shipped out over to Britain. And that's why the people were starving. And the military was used to occupy them and to ensure that the country was totally pillaged and any type of insurrection was kept down. So Peel created the modern police, and because the military repression was not that effective because, well, those were military men, and they're more they're more set up to fight battles. So he set up what they called them was a peace preservation force for pacifying a recalcitrant population. And so from the very beginning, this is what he established them with, was a government pacification force. And so just a lower level of occupation than a just straight up military occupation. And so even his peeling principles, which I love, are basically window dressing and also a way of, hey, we need to milk these people for everything they're worth and control them at the same time. So, we're going to put a glove, a softer glove over this iron fist of occupation.
So he was a basic politician.
Yeah, right. And and they brought it into Britain and London, and they did it on their own citizens. And so they would patrol the quote unquote public areas and direct it towards the poor and, the people that were, chained to the Industrial Revolution workhouses in Britain. And, that came over to the cities in the U.S. and they did the same thing. So the police, they're there to police in the most malevolent way you can imagine.
Right.
Police the poor and the non-elites. And so the elites were left to their own devices in a lot of ways, and they could regulate themselves. But the poor people got the heavy hand, and that has carried on today. And historically, is directed at any type of minorities. Black, Native American, Asians. We've seen even poor whites, hillbillies, and whatever else. We've seen that to this day, and so I would tell police officers today. So you look at the history of policing, and it's had these horribly abusive and oppressive aspects throughout history. Union labor suppression. The massacre of Native Americans. All of these things, and you're going to tell me that somehow today in your generation that, we're not oppressive anymore. You just happen to be part of, one of the greatest, most powerful governments in the world. You're the armed government enforcer for the most powerful government in the history of mankind, who also happens to incarcerate the world's largest prison population ever, and larger than any country, higher incarceration rate than China. And somehow, but you're the good guy now?
Exactly.
You might want to rethink that just a little bit.
Exactly.
Speaking of history, you know who Radley Balko is, Raeford?
The Rise of the Warrior Cop.
I did a review of that on my website. I think he's a little bit slanted, but man, do I really like the way he looks at a lot of principles in the history.
No, yeah, Radley. He does some great writing.
I think that was the book where I figured out. I think he said it might have been Peele that decided where we get that thin blue line from. He was the one that said. Peele said, "No, we're not wearing red coats. We're wearing blue, because if we wear red, we're too much like the military. So let's kind of make sure that we're very differentiated from that. Which obviously, in today's day and age, we're not much different.
Yeah. And the public at the time were very hostile to them, and they called them blue locusts.
Oh.
So,
wow. Blue locusts? Wow.
Blue locusts.
Maybe you guys want to move into some Liberty questions? How about that?
Let's do it.
Raeford, how about let's do our 5 Liberty questions. What is one of your top concerns that can have an impact on your liberty or lifestyle? We've kind of covered quite a bit of them, but
I know we've talked quite a bit, and we've talked so much law enforcement. But I would like to get into maybe some more other kind of libertarian principles,
absolutely,
and our financial system, and that kind of helped bring me along, kind of into this anarchist voluntarist world. And I know if you're a big Vin Armani fan, then he's talking about alternative currencies and everything. Just how, and people, I said the word alternative currencies, and everybody's going, "Oh yeah, that's just a bunch of BS." Oh, as opposed to the totally imaginary Federal Reserve that's not a part of the federal government, but it's approved by them. So
right.
I would look at it just of our financial system and how it's just manipulated to keep us in inflation, and manipulation and taxation, and how that's looking to keep us impoverished. I think that's one of the biggest things. I speak it up against law enforcement because I have some credibility there, and I'm speaking to other officers because that's the harm they cause. But wow, this financial system is just a massive and financial surreptitious enslavement system.
Yep.
You won't find any arguments here.
Definitely not.
When you have what I call character building days, or life is challenging, what do you do to kind of bring about mental relaxation or insight or clarity for yourself?
In my process, like I said, there's really this 2 years after I got out of policing, and I have an injury with my leg that I really suffer a lot of pain with. I can get around and walk and stuff, and that's good, but I have a lot of pain with that. I'm fascinated how changing my diet has helped me and clear up my mind. Not really on a specific day, but just overall part of kind of my awakening, I guess you could say. I changed my diet. I kind of went to this whole paleo,
Oh man, I love that.
Raw milk is just one of my favorites.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And so I pretty much do everything counter to modern, pop culture, health advice. And I eat one meal a day, and it's got a lot of protein and fat in it.
One meal. What time do you do? What time of the day do you?
I usually eat in the evening. I'll eat twice a day as well, and kind of do that intermittent fasting and then exercise. I'm real limited to what I can do exercise wise, but try to do that, and that has helped clear my mind and help me think straight. I'm not quite sure I could have gotten this far in freeing myself up if it wasn't for changing my diet. Is that the right path for everyone? What I took, no, but definitely getting away from modern food pyramid recommendations helps me keep me from going insane and breaking down.
I like to say, if you I completely forgot what I like to say. If you want to change your life, just take every recommendation that the government recommends and do the exact opposite, and you will come out 1,000% better.
Yeah.
So if they say,
might be kind of really,
don't eat this, eat it. If they say, do this, don't do that. If they say, don't exercise.
Don't drink raw milk.
Yeah, don't drink raw milk. Drink raw milk. Please drink raw milk.
Eat tons of bread and carbs and noodles and starches.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, now I do that and it kills me.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I start to see. I think in grand ways that is intentional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah. You know what? I think you guys will be proud of me too. I just ordered today a Berkey water filtration system.
Oh, nice.
And I added the fluoride filters to it.
Very nice.
Really excited.
Very nice. One of the things that we're looking at is Berkey has a separate company that does whole house filters, whole house systems, and we're looking at putting one of those in our house pretty soon.
Guys, I just bought new water filters today. That's what I did just before I got online with y'all.
Me too.
Well, I need to catch up then. Raeford, a mentor once told me, start every day happy. So how do you start your day with positivity, or how do you start your day on the right side of the bed?
Well, I don't.
Or on the left side.
Not even close. Not even close.
Lots of coffee.
Yeah. Wow. Coffee's great. Man, I don't stay happy. I don't. I've got a good family, and a great wife and kids, and a dog and kitty cats, and my day job is fulfilling, and so you just keep kind of moving on. Understand, but you ain't gonna be happy, and in a lot of ways, but just keep moving. Sorry.
Just keep moving.
Make it. No, that worked. Make it to tomorrow.
Good. Yeah.
Sometimes, just make it to the weekend. Make it.
It ain't all right. Rainbows and sunshine.
You got to have the bad days to appreciate the good days.
One of our buddies says, it's not all rainbow farting unicorns. We've kind of hit on quite a bit in terms of suggestions of what people can do to start improving their liberty. We've talked about cryptocurrency, alternative currencies. We've mainly addressed law enforcement. Do you have any specific actions that you'd recommend people take to start improving their liberty and maybe help them unplug more? Anything that we haven't covered?
You have to analyze ways in your life that you harm other people and support an unjust system, and stop doing that. Withdraw your consent and your support, and speak out. You can, I think that's part of the process as well. You have to kind of wake up other people and help them. They were where you were just a few years ago. So, help them along. So you have to find out ways that you contribute to the problem and withdraw your consent and participation and speak out.
So a good bit of self-reflection. Last sort of liberty question that we like to ask guests. Do you have any recommended reading, YouTube, workshops, podcasting for liberty, or specific topics that we kind of touched on this evening?
With the nurse Wobbles video, and we were talking about Sir Robert Peel also. The person who came to mind is William N. Grigg. William Grigg. He was part of the Libertarian Institute, and he passed away last year. And I had some time. I got to converse with him, through emails. He's just one of the he wielded the pen as a sword in ways that you just can't imagine, and in opposition to the state, and just wrote article after article about individual injustices by people, and his command of the English language is just absolutely masterful. Will Grigg, Pro Libertate is his blog. It's still up. And also, I think there's some parts over at the Libertarian Institute. So check out, Will Grigg. I'm looking at when you talked about Peelian principles, I'm looking at one of his articles right now. Policing was militarized from the start. And
oh, wow.
And it's just his repertoire of writing that he's done since probably the 1980s or 70s is fantastic.
Awesome.
And we'll have to put that on the show notes.
Would you recommend the Libertarian Institute as well?
I do. They have Scott Horton. Scott Horton does a podcast. It's mostly foreign policy. He just came out with a book called Fool's Errand about the war in Afghanistan, and he's talked to journalists and former foreign policy experts and everything for 10 years or really even longer than that. And he's been great on. I look at Scott Horton. He's one of the first guys that I did a podcast with. I remember something like it was like a daytime special movie back in the 70s about somebody's kid that was caught up in a cult, and they had to re-kidnap the kid, and they paid some like professional deprogrammers to deprogram their kid. So I always imagined, I think Scott Horton's a great podcaster, and he's so good on everything. And I look at Scott as like one of those deprogrammers, and I have to get a little dose of him every day to keep me disabused of that whole cult notion about American awesomeness and our military greatness and the law enforcement arch. He's really good on Waco.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love that.
So
we'll have to put that in the show notes and look it up. Thank you.
My favorite comeback when people say America is great, the greatest this, the greatest that. I always say, based on what? And then they have a really hard time with that.
You look at the anti-war. You look at all of our wars too. That's brought me over as well. It's just you just have to admit all of it's based on deception and lies, and just at best was just war for destructive purposes, and certainly none that since I've been alive have any justification. You can't say you really served or protected anyone.
I mean, I always get approached by sweet old ladies when I'm in my military uniform, and they say, "Oh, thank you so much." And it's really hard for me to tell them, lady, in the last 100 years, we haven't done anything to protect you. I mean, it's hard. So I go, okay, thanks.
I would get the same thing. I remember being out on the street, and I would have people come up and especially women, and they grab my hands. Oh, thank you so much for what you're doing, and they would try to really just pour their empathy into me. And I had convenience store clerks do that to me, and I'm thinking, dang. I don't want your job. Your job's dangerous. Yeah, I'm thinking I would rather have my job than your job working the night shift at the convenience store.
Oh, wow.
And just, so those little things, it always kind of made me a little uncomfortable.
Raeford, you said you wanted to get into some libertarian stuff. Do you want to, the floor is yours from here on. We covered all our big questions that we had for you. Is there anything that you in particular would like to cover that we haven't?
Well, I think we did pretty good for today. I just want to repeat again the non-aggression principle. It is never okay to initiate force against another person, force, fraud, or coercion. You can use physical force to defend yourself, but you cannot initiate physical force against someone to coerce them into an action.
Exactly.
That is all. So you have to align all of your actions with that. There's no constitution that can alter that fundamental moral principle of human interaction. There's no badge. There's no law. There's no majority of the population. There's just what particular political, geographic area that you live in does not alter fundamental principles of right and wrong when it comes to using force. And the main part of that, it is never okay to initiate violence against another person.
Yep. It's one of my 3 life rules.
Yeah. So now when you apply that in your life, does it get a little more complicated? You bet. But you've got to at least start from there. And as if you are anyone that's in a particular position such as law enforcement, where you have even some type of professional security service person, then you even have a greater responsibility to abide by that. And even when you do have that right to use force, it should be as of a last resort.
Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
And not even a last resort, but not just not even at all. You just let it go. Yeah, that's it's very basic, but it can if everyone would follow that, I think we might just be a little bit better off.
Yep, I agree.
All right, Raeford, where can people find you and kind of follow you? I know you're real active on Twitter. I see you on there almost every day.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Raeford D. I have posted a few articles at Libertarian Institute. I've got a blog, Blue Enmity. I haven't written too much on it. I got one of my favorite articles that I wrote, Murder in the Service of the Drug War, that maybe we could link to that article.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I do, lots of podcasts. I need to keep it all in one on one page, but I'm always trying to spread liberty and just kind of challenge people thinking, get them to pull that thread. I use the drug war a lot, but you pull on that about when it's okay to use force and how counterproductive a lot of what we accept as what we accept as rightful use of force in society is actually horribly counterproductive. And say, what else do we do that's also possibly unjust and counterproductive?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Ox, do you want to wrap us up?
Do the outro or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of episode 13. We would definitely like to thank our special guest, Raeford Davis, for hanging out with us tonight. And like you said, introducing us to a new thread to kind of tug at and pull on. Thanks for listening, and we hope you tune in next week.